Why on earth is van life booming in Australia in 2025 and across the entire globe? What the hell is happening? Stay tuned to this video to find out why. So if you've been following this channel, you know that I got to Australia in July of 2019. I've been here for almost 6 years now, and I have spent so much time traveling this country. I'm probably on my second or third lap. Not to boast, but I've done a heap of traveling here. I love the van life, I love travel life, I love being outdoors. And one thing I've really noticed over the last couple of years specifically is the increase in the amount of people traveling, the increase in how full the caravan parks are, the campgrounds are. And along with that, I've realized that the price of places is going up. The government is starting to crack down on free campsites. The government's starting to crack down on cheap campsites. They're making everybody pay through the roof to stay somewhere, and everywhere's booked out for 6 months in advance. And I have a few theories as to why that may be. So COVID hit in 2020, and I was actually traveling up the west coast of WA. I was in the Kimberleys and I was heading towards Darwin at the time. And one of the first things I remember was when I got to Darwin, bearing in mind I'd just been in Western Australia, I remember that they closed the borders. The first thing they did actually was close the borders internationally. So it was almost impossible to get out of Australia. And being from the UK and being on a temporary visa and not knowing if I was going to see my family or not made that very stressful for me. But I realized that you could no longer really travel internationally for a holiday from 2020 because of COVID. And I believe that during that period, heaps of people got into traveling. They realized they couldn't travel abroad anymore, and Australia is such an amazing country, a beautiful landscape to look across. And I think there was heaps of people who decided to go, you know what, I still want my holiday. I can't go abroad. I'm gonna buy a caravan, I'm gonna buy a camper van, and I'm gonna go travel around the country that I was born in or the country I live in. And I mean, fair play to everybody, but I think that ignited a spark for a lot of people because they could no longer go abroad to Bali, to Asia, to Europe for their yearly holiday. So all they were limited to was being able to travel Oz. And to be honest with you, they weren't even able to travel interstate. It got to a point where, like, if you were stuck in the NT, as I was, it was such a pain to go from one state to the other that you were forced to travel within your state for 99% of the time. So with COVID, I think it forced a lot of people into lockdown. People could no longer travel abroad, people could no longer travel internationally. They were forced to travel local for their holidays, which makes sense. It was bullshit, but it made sense. You know, you still want to have your holiday. It's so miserable being trapped inside all day. Another point I wanted to make about COVID was that a lot of people were forced to stay home and work from home, so they were no longer going into their office. They were working remotely, and you know, when you start working remotely after a while, you're sat at home every day. I'm sure you get to a point where you're thinking like, I could go on holiday and still do my work maybe. So I think there was quite a few people who decided to opt into the van life at that time because they knew they could buy a camper van, still get paid their salary and travel around the state that they were in at the time. So I think that is another reason why a lot of people opted for the van life. And finally, on the topic of COVID and the increase in people doing van life, I think the other huge reason was mental health. Like, I think at the time, I don't know about all of you guys watching it, but mental health was a big thing, especially during COVID. Everybody was locked down. It was crazy. Like, we had restrictions. We couldn't go interstate. You couldn't go abroad. You know, sometimes you couldn't even leave the house. You needed passes to go in anywhere. And I think people's mental health suffered crazy amounts during that time period. And I believe a lot of people realized that just being outdoors was such a huge game changer for your mental health. Reason number 2, and I think this is the biggest factor at the moment. I know this is true for me, and I know this is true for a hell of a lot of people. The cost of living crisis at the moment in Australia, I know it's the same in the UK. If anything, it's even worse in the UK. But the cost of living crisis is insane. It's insane. Did you know that the median house price in Australia at the moment in major cities is $650 a week? $650 a week. If you're able to buy yourself a camper van, you know, just buy an old van, a caravan and a 4-wheel drive, or a 4-wheel drive and a roof tent, you can go stay at a campsite for free these days. Now, don't get me wrong, there's less and less of them about, as I was saying, like I feel like the government's really cracking down on it at the moment. But you could stay somewhere for free instead of paying $650 a week on rent, $400 a week on rent, whatever. You could stay for free, and all you need is the cost of fuel, the cost of groceries. Or, you know, you could stay somewhere for free for a couple of days, then you could shift to another spot, then you could go pay for a campsite for a night for $40 and have a hot shower. There's just so many options, and I really believe that like more people are getting into van life because it's a cheaper alternative. And as I've said in many of my videos before, van life these days, it isn't what it used to be. Like, it's not rough and ready. You're not like a homeless. You can't charge your phone. You're not necessarily losing out on a lot if you're living in a van or if you're living in a caravan. So many setups these days are off grid. You can have solar panels on the roof. You can have lithium batteries in the back. You've got a fridge. You can have Starlink so you get internet anywhere. You can have almost all of the modern commodities that you would have in a house in a caravan or a van. It makes a lot of sense for people when it's so much cheaper to live on the road than it is to get a lease, get a mortgage, and pay the ridiculous amounts that you have to in rent and bills and be trapped in that city lifestyle. It's literally saving Aussies like tens of thousands of dollars a year doing that. And I can see it. I mean, from someone who lives on the road quite a lot, like I see it. And fair play to them. I think it's a great way to live. I'd do it if it was cheap or if it was expensive. I know a lot of people have turned to this lifestyle because it's a cheaper way of going about life, but it's a beautiful way to live as well, so more power to them. My third and final main point as to why I think life on the road in Oz has increased tenfold is there's a big demographic shift. So I'm 29 years old, and me and my partner spend time in houses as we are now, but we spend a lot of time living on the road in our camper van. And a couple of years ago, apart from backpackers, internationals, and I suppose I should include myself in backpackers, there wasn't a lot of young people at campsites and at caravan parks. Traditionally, a lot of the people who travel around Australia were, your retirees, kind of older folk who were looking for maybe a slower way of life and doing the big slow lap around Oz and cruising around. And there's still heaps of those, and that's great, being a grey nomad. But I've noticed a huge demographic shift in the people staying at campsites and caravan parks over the last year or so. I think maybe because of YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, it's now become trendy to do van life, right? Whereas maybe 10 years ago, 20 years ago, if you lived in the van or if you lived in a caravan, you were just seen as homeless. You were seen as a hippie. You were seen as a delinquent. Whereas now it's like, it's trendy. It's like, hey, look at me, I'm in the van, woohoo, I'm living the dream, I'm by the beach, sort of thing. So I think there's a hell of a lot more younger people getting into van life. So I'll give you my opinion on what I think about this now, but I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments whether you think this is a good thing or a bad thing. More Aussies getting into the van life, getting into the nomadic lifestyle, more people across the globe are doing it. And I'd love to hear what you think about it, whether you think it's a good thing, whether you think it's a bad thing, whether you don't care. You might not care. Let me know. So my thoughts on it personally, I think it's a double-edged sword. Like, I think it's great that more people are doing the van life or the nomadic lifestyle. I think it's something that I wish some of my friends, my family, I wish there was people I knew and that I loved that, got to experience some of the things that I do on a day-to-day basis. And not to say that, woohoo, my life's like the greatest thing ever, but when you're just on the road and you're stopping at some beautiful waterfall, or you're going to a different beach every day and you're sunbathing, you're snorkeling, and it's a cheap lifestyle and you don't have a mortgage or a lease or huge bills to pay. I just think to myself, this is incredible. I'm literally living the dream. I love it. And the fact that there's more people out there in the world that are getting into this lifestyle and doing this, I think it's great. I think it's great. The more people that can do it, the better, because I think the more people are going to be happier in their life, happier with other people. The campervan nomadic lifestyle is becoming more accepting, I think, as a result of this. But on the flip side, I think that the government is realizing how many people are now into this lifestyle, and it's nothing to do with the people, but I think the government is realizing that it's a cash cow, and there's so many people who are opting for this lifestyle because they can't afford to pay the rent anymore because of the cost of living crisis. So the government's now going, wait a second, all these people are moving out of these houses and they're going to these national parks and caravan parks instead. Let's up the cost of everything, you know, let's increase the cost of the national park pass fee. A video I did the other week about New South Wales considering increasing the cost of like campsites to up to $89 per night in peak season. It's ridiculous, and it's just a complete money grab, and I think it's one of the only big downsides of like more people getting into this lifestyle. And you know, I think the benefits outweigh it for the general population. I'm glad everybody can get into this lifestyle, but I've really noticed a significant increase in the overhead costs of living that nomadic lifestyle full time. Just the cost of campsites, campgrounds is insane. And then more to the point as well, like some of these places you want to go to, like Exmouth at the top of Western Australia, and a lot of these areas that are like, you know, must see, they get booked out 6 months in advance. It's almost impossible these days to stay at some of the best places, because unless you're booking 6 months in advance, you're not going to go there. And then you might even turn up and there'll be heaps of like ghost campsites where people have paid for it 6 months ago, and they don't even turn up. And I think obviously the more people that are doing this lifestyle, the more people that are doing that, the more people that are ghost booking, the more people that are, you know, happy to pay $89 per night for a campsite because they don't know any different. And the people who've been doing this travel lifestyle, this nomadic lifestyle for a little bit longer, I think we're seeing the change in like the overhead costs of camping, and it sucks. Like it's shit, but it's not through the fault of like us, the people. I believe it's the governments, the people in charge are going, hey, you know, more people are doing this, let's rinse as much money as we can from them. And it's going to get to a point where it's going to be stupidly expensive to go camping. It's no longer going to be the cheaper alternative. It's going to be more expensive to go camping than it is to stay at home, which is, it's sad really. But that's life in 2025, my friends. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I would love to hear your thoughts down below. Thank you very much for watching, and bye, Felicia.